Welcome. They're working, mate. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience yet again. You're right, you're right. Yeah, welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome Dr. Tom from Unusual Pet Vets, who's our guest speaker today. So I'm sure we'll hear some interesting information about producing healthy youngsters, healthy babies for the upcoming breeding season and hand rearing season. Just a couple of things. We'll have a fairly short meeting today. We'll briefly, Scott will just give us an update on the Paris 24 convention, how we're sitting with 1 month to go. So we're all very excited about that. We're looking forward to our speakers coming over from overseas and around Australia, and also just catching up with other bird breeders for a great weekend. On that note, some of you may have seen Hayden Van Hoof post, Clive did a week ago or whatever, just wondering, obviously they have a fair group of Kiwis coming over for the convention, and even though we'll have our aviary tour on the Friday, he was just wondering if anyone would be open to having a few of them that are hanging around in the following week come and have a look at their aviaries. So if anyone is willing to let a few Kiwis into their aviaries to have a look, that'd be great. And if so, either message him on Facebook or contact someone who could touch base with him. I'll just go through one other thing before I hand over to Jude and Scott. You probably all remember Dr. Alex Mastakov. His wife, some of you may have seen it on Facebook the last couple of days. His wife has sent me a message just wondering, and we will share her Facebook post to our Parrot Society page, but he was an avid collector of rare plants, particularly fruiting trees, fruiting plants. I believe he's got about 700, or she's got about 700 plants in pots, from small seedlings right through to reasonable sized trees that she's looking at. I believe she's looking at moving from Landsborough, where they are at the moment. So we will share it on on our Facebook page, our Parrot Society page. But I do have a list of the plants if anyone wants to have a look. I thought I told her, look, I'd like to bring it up at the meeting first, give anyone here that turns up a bit of a look, if any of these rarer varieties appeal to them, and even someone like Klaus. I was just wondering if Klaus, or certainly if someone wanted to talk to Klaus about some of the things that they have, she could hold, or she said no holds, but someone could pick them up for him. But no, they are for purchase. But I'm sure she wants to get rid of a lot of stuff. So, yep. Landsborough. Sunshine Coast, sorry, yeah. That's as much as I know. She has given me an address, but I said, look, I'd prefer people just to message her on Facebook. But, yep. Well, not on the list. Not on the list. Yeah. So there is a list here that people can have a squiz at when we have a barbecue later, and certainly we'll share it on the Facebook page. And there'll be some very interesting things that if you're into plants and into gardening, it's to get a hold of, and obviously a lot of these things could be good fruiting things for your own birds and that as well. So we'll have a look at that later, and we'll share that to the Parrot Society page, Kerry, sometime this afternoon or tomorrow, with her details on there, and some people can contact her through that. So other than that, look, that's really all I've got to say. I'll pass over to Jude for a bit of a treasurer's report and an update, and then Scott will give us a little brief update on the last few weeks leading up to Paris 24. So thank you.
No, there'll be no cancelling of anything. We're in for a penny, in for a pound. That's what I reckon. Now, very short, I'll just give you the bank balances. Memberships has $1,200 in it this morning. Sales account has 9,701. The events account it's 14,000 at the moment, but I just had to juggle a little bit because it's actually got $2 more thousand worth in that. So that's going really, really well. That's for the convention. We've paid for some flights already, and and some other things out of it. So we're still going really well, which is positive. And the other thing is just the trust, which I'm in charge of as well, and that's got 5,184 in it. And this will be great. We're going to get some money with the convention, and then we'll build the trust up again, and then we'll donate some more. Because, I've said before, we donated $15,000 to our team at station. So that pledge has been honoured, and that's all gone to them. So, the trust is down a little bit, but it's okay. Basically, the shop is doing really well. I haven't got any figures, but, we've got a new shop person on, and he's a lovely boy. A little guy, oh man, is he? Okay, looks like a boy to me, but anyway, so now we've still got 3 staff, and Tara's doing an amazing job, and so, but I don't have any figures for the shop, but I believe it's holding its own, and we've got money in the bank, so I think it's doing all right. Yeah, but every time I say that, someone says it's a quiet time of the year. Oh, February, it's a quiet time of the year. So now we're February, March, April, May, June. Okay. Baby season. So I'm positive, and so that's about it from me. Short and sweet.
Oh God! All right.
I know it. I've been told I talk too much, so I'm afraid to talk.
You never shut up.
I do.
You drive her down the car, Rod. Hey, she just you don't get to talk.
He doesn't even need it.
All right. Yeah, probably don't. But anyway, look. Is it working? Yeah. All right. The convention, the Avery tour. We've got 4 visits in the Avery tour. It is I've got to remember the name. Julia and Andrew Osberger. If you want to see the most ringnecks in the world, basically, they've got other birds as well, but mainly ringnecks. Barry and Julie Blanche, Gary Stumpke, and Mario Muscat. So they're all from Ipswich, Carolee, out to Rosewood and Plainland. What order we do them is yet to be decided, whether we drive to the furthest one and work our way back or work our way out and have a big drive back. That would probably be my choice because it's in the middle of winter, so late afternoon, you don't want to be driving to the furthest place in the afternoon to get to see, getting to people's places late in the afternoon. Better to do them early and get there early and have a big long drive back. So there's still plenty of space on the bus tour. Look, the whole convention, we'd still like to see a heap more people rock up, and because at the moment it will run to loss. Well, we realised that a long time ago, and we sort of thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Possibly the last big convention that the club will run, as far as I'm concerned anyway, and Ben and I. Basically, you're outlaying 50,000 or something on a chance. You've got to commit to all this. Most conventions now, the number's getting smaller and smaller, especially with today's economic climate. So we'll see how we go. But yeah, it should be a great weekend. There's, like most of our overseas speakers, we're only waiting on Neva Guare. I think that's how you say her name, her last name, surname. She's finally got a visa. She was looking at booking her flights to come over, so it should be great. So we'll see how we go. It's going to be a great weekend. Doesn't matter how many people there. So look, at the moment, I think all up, it's roughly, don't quote me, about 80 people all up, including speakers, that sort of thing. So look, we're going to have a great weekend. Doesn't matter how many there. The more the merrier, but it is what it is. So yeah. But anyway, apart from that, I think that's it. We're just starting to organise delegate bags, delegate handbook, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's all the little minor things now. So yeah, it should be all come together well, and we'll see how we go. All right. Any questions on the convention?
You've all bought your tickets, haven't
Yeah, well, some. But anyway.
You right, Ben? Yep.
Anybody got anything they want to ask about?
Yeah. So I was just going to say the other thing was there are obviously single day passes now for anyone who was wanting just a single day. It's and step up only. Yeah, all that's on the website. So if you do know somebody who was sitting on the fence whether they wanted to come, they could probably choose a day that suited them, and they certainly can come along too. So.
At the moment, I think Avery Tour is still only open to delegates.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't want somebody like, well, you've got to respect the people who you're visiting. I don't need that. All right. Yeah. Avery Tour visits, it's only open to, it's the only thing that's only open to delegates, purely and simply the fact that you've got to respect the people's places you're going to. So, you know, those that commit to come in the convention are sort of, I suppose, you know, they're the people that you want going to an Avery tour. You know, you don't want somebody saying, oh, I'll pay the money and go and visit these 4 people, stuff the convention, that sort of thing. So that's always been the case with previous conventions. So I think we're going to keep it the same way. Yeah, so that's it. People have been gracious enough to open their properties for us to look at. So, yeah, we've just got to respect them and, you know, that's it. So, all right.
Very, very good. Thank you. So, yeah, thanks to those 4 breeders that are offering to open it, which will be very interesting. I've been to Barry's, but many, many years ago, and Gary Stumpke I've known for a long time, but haven't been to his Avery's for a fair while, so it'll be good to get back to those and see the other 2 breeders as well. So, we're nearly ready to roll, Ben? Yep. All right, so we'll... yeah, any questions about anything while we're waiting? Yep, Martin. So Bird is it 30th of June, so very soon. From what, not 9:30. Yep. Very good. Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, very good. Very good. Ooh. Yep. Yeah, Donna and Bree are stuck on the roadside with a flat tyre. And yeah, she couldn't get the lock nuts undone apparently, so they've got, I think, the RACQ or someone coming to help. Scott's about to give you an update on the Caboolture bird sale.
Yeah, well, I will. Look, we had the bird sale 27th of April, I think it was. It was a long week. Well, the Thursday was Anzac Day. So we had plenty of tables, more tables than ever before. We had 64, I think, vendor tables and 8 or 10 trade tables. So, look, numbers, I thought public numbers through the door was a little bit down on normal. Some of the sellers had good days. I don't know about most sellers, but some of the sellers I saw and talked to had a good day. So, yeah. So there's a lesson learned. We won't do it with a anywhere near public holiday, but that was the only weekend that was available that wouldn't impinge on any other sales in the... Yeah, that's it. Well, bird sales are down over the board, like everywhere. So that's it. But yeah, look, it was a good day. One thing I will think that we should look at next year, we opened at the public at 9 till 1. By 12 o'clock, a lot of the sellers were sort of starting to pack up and go. So I think we might just make it 9 till 12 in future, just 3 hours. Because, yeah, pointless keeping your sale open till 1 o'clock if you haven't got buyers there. So yeah, just short, sharp. It's no good making it earlier because it just hurries everything up. You know, getting birds in the morning, getting them settled, all that sort of thing. So 3 hours is plenty for a sale our size. You know, orange and that sort of thing, Gunnedah, all that. You know, a lot bigger than ours. So yeah, 4 hours. But so yeah, apart from that, it was a good day. It was run really smoothly. It worked out well. So yeah, thanks to everybody that pitched in and gave us a hand, and thanks to everybody that come and bought some birds. So yeah, that's it. So lesson learnt there. So yeah, we'll see how we go next year. But we are talking, I'm at it, about at our old premises around the road, we had an open day / mini bird sale. We are talking about having that here, but if we do that, it will be in the back where we have our barbecue area. So it'll be a winter month sort of thing. And the only thing there will be, if we do run one, it'll be free entry to everybody. That's where the last one was. It can be cancelled at short notice if it turns out it's going to rain that weekend because it'll be outside. We might have a few marquees up and that sort of thing, but it won't be for everybody. So yeah, that's it. So if you got any thoughts on that, let us know. But it just, I suppose, free bird sale, and last one was pretty good. We had a good time. The people that rocked up last time. So yeah, it was just a fun day, and we sold a few birds. So yeah, but anyway, that was just thought I'd bring that up while we were doing it.
All right, thank you very much. Well, it looks like we're ready to roll. No, we're not ready to roll. It's getting a bit ridiculous. Do you want to pause? All right. We're just having a bit of fun setting up. So we'll just take 5 minutes and see how we go with the Okay, all right. Well, just give us 5 minutes, talk amongst yourselves. And if you've got any other questions, throw them out this way. Or between yourself, yeah, and raffle tickets. Let's draw the raffle. Whoa, let's not draw the raffle. Yes. The August speaker is... Isn't that Mark? Mark Windows? I think you could be right there. Yeah, so our next meeting will be Mark Windows on Conyers. He's had a bit to do with Conyers over the years, so I won't be here. So Rod or someone will have to run that one because I'm hopping on the plane to NZ. Yeah. Rekindles, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Dr. Pat. No. Dr. Pat for October. And who was the December? Yeah. You know his last what? Oh. I gone blank too. So yes, a South Australian bird breeder. What's he specialise in? Right, Jason Wright. What's he specialise in? Sorry, African parrots. Okay, that'll be interesting too. Yeah, and Conyers. There you go. Yeah, so that'll be good in for our Christmas meeting. Yeah. Okay, we'll get ready. Bear with us for a moment, please.
Margaret Baisley from Mackay won the Yellow Crown Amazon and the cage that the Parrot Society donated, and she was very excited when she won it. It was good to see it go to someone up there, and they all said to thank the Parrot Society for their generosity. I'll try and knock up something to give to your editor, and I got some photos and stuff, but I think they did quite well out of that. That sort of stuff goes very well up there, and the Yellow Crown, she's a lovely bird, but I was glad to say bye-bye, Charlie, because they're noisy. She was noisy and she barks, and I said to Margaret, wait till she starts barking, you'll know what she's like. Beautiful bird, but noisy. So, but anyway, thanks again to the Parrot Society for the generosity. The Northern Avian, thanks you very much.
Yeah, for those that don't know, every year the Parrot Society's donated a cage, and Martin's donated a hand-raised bird. He'll get a bird off a breeder if he hadn't got one himself, and he'll hand-raise it and then grab a cage off the Parrot Society and take it up to Northern Avian. So, yeah, that's it. So, that's been going on for a fair few years now, so yeah. But anyway, that's it. Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. That's all right. So, all right.
How's that? Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for having me. I'm Dr. Tom. I'm up at Brisbane Bird Vets mostly. Do a little bit at Jindalee from time to time. See how this thing works? Wonderful. So today we're going to talk about producing healthy birds. You guys probably know a ton of information already, so I'm not here to teach grandma how to suck eggs, literally or figuratively. It's more just, I'm here to sort of start a discussion and give you some input from a vet's perspective. I spoke to an unnamed member earlier who said when he hears vets talk, he often wants to go home and release all his birds because he realises he's doing everything wrong. So if you contribute something, it'll be less doom and gloom, because we are a lot of doom and gloom vets. Every time we see something unwell, we always know the poor prognosis or this or that, and so I feel like all we talk about is doom and gloom. So feel free to chip in, put your hand up, shout out, do whatever, so that we can get through it. All right, so today we're going to help cover a quick reproductive anatomy and physiology. We're going to go out through some nutrition, in and out of the reproductive season and how that differs. Looking at setting up aviaries for success in producing birds. Investigating issues, if you have them, some of the common reproductive diseases we see in practice. And they're all very important, that's why they're all number one. Not because it was a formatting error. All right, so who's involved in producing healthy birds? There's obviously the vet on the left and the people who keep the birds. Yeah, it's a matter of working together. You know, often when we see them, we see when things have gone wrong. If we can work together to try and understand the species, because often the breeders and the people who own the birds know way more about their individual species of interest. Like the gentleman next month who's talking about conures. He'd know everything there is to know about conures, I reckon. And working with that, the vets tend to know more about the medicine and how to fix the diseases and when things go wrong. But I think if we can work together, then that will better benefit all the patients. So, anatomy and physiology. Basically, birds, when they're in the egg, so as a fetus, they've got both a right and a left reproductive tract. As they develop, they basically only end up with the left. So all the germinal cells get put on the left-hand side. The mature ovum grow up in the ovary. They get released into the infundibulum, which is basically a big catching glove to catch your yolk. And that passes down through, let me get a bit closer, I haven't got my glasses on, the magnum, and which is where they start to add in the albumin, your isthmus, which sort of plumps up with your waters and your proteins, and your uterus, which is where you get your shell gland and your pigments and things being added on. And now we're going to move on. That's basically all you really need to know about reproductive anatomy and physiology. I can go into the hormones if you're really interested, but come and see me afterwards because it isn't that thrilling. Nutrition is our next topic. So, yeah, you know, it's not just about getting the calories in. As you can see, it doesn't always end so well. Nutrition is about both the, obviously, nutritional component of the food, but also about how we present the food to the various species. So, you know, your budgies are ground parrots. So if you put them all up high, then it's about how do you enrich them to keep them both nutritionally healthy, but also emotionally healthy as well. So the problems we face in nutrition, often there's no gold standard for the species that you're trying to feed. So traditionally, people said replicate what's in the wild. Not always easy to do when people haven't studied the dietary makeup of these species, and also it will vary from season to season. So it's a dry season, a wet season. You know, is it a boom or bust type of environment? So it can go many years through drought, and then suddenly you've got this huge flourish of food, and that can be really difficult if you don't raise a species that's in your locally, normally in your general area, trying to get food that works. So, for example, you know, your Lear's macaw will subsist mostly on liqueur palm nuts, but those can be really tricky to get in captivity. So trying to follow that whole thing, whereas your Amazons need low-fat foods because they're really prone to obesity. So, you know, juggling based on what's happening in your actual species. So that brings us to our options are pellets or fresh food, or both. And then we'll look a little bit about seasonal behaviors and how you can use food to stimulate the reproductive season in a seasonal pattern. So fresh food versus pellets. Pellets are great. They're all compounded with the vitamins and the minerals and the calcium and everything that we need in a lovely, convenient little packet. They're great for the bird's physical well-being in that you're never worried about missing micronutrients and things like that. But they're kind of boring. If you put the seeds in a bowl, in the wild he'd spend, 8 to 10 hours foraging, and he gets the food in about 30 seconds. You know, what are we going to do for the next 11 hours, 59 minutes and 30 seconds? Probably just sort of, you know, destroy stuff and just get really bored. So, fresh foods on their own can be tricky to get a well-balanced diet, especially if you've got picky birds that want to choose out certain things that they actually like. So you can offer all this stuff, but if we're only eating, say, the chilies or the carrot or the corn, because corn's high full of sugar and it's lovely and delicious, then we're going to miss out on other vitamins like our vitamin A's and our calciums and things like that. I generally go for both. I think if you can get the sort of nutritional rounding off of pellets, and then you can basically use the fresh food to forage and to create sort of that time budget. So replicate how much time they spend foraging in the wild and try and boost that emotional well-being as well as the physical well-being. And a lot of these will use fresh food as a sort of indicator for when the reproductive season is coming on. So if we look at seasonal nutrition, so there's been many studies out there as to what drives parrots to know it's the reproductive season. So you've got your long day lengths. Not much you can do to control that. The sun does what it wants. You've got your rainfall, which I've not been in Brisbane for very long, but from what I've experienced, it can be quite erratic and not easy to control. So generally, you'd be looking for a clear wet and dry season. We sort of have like a wet season and then a not as wet season. And then, yeah, basically the number one driver that they've proven is the availability of fresh food. So a lot of those rain and sun and things, the birds think, oh, I recognize that, and I line that up with the abundance of fresh food, and that's what's causing that stimulus for breeding. So in the dry season, or instead of the off season where they're not breeding, if you provide mostly nutritionally balanced food, so mostly a pelleted diet and some low energy veg, you're not overstimulating the birds outside of the normal time of breeding. And then when you hit the wet season, so as we're heading into the reproductive season, if we start to ramp up our rich fruit and veg, our nuts and legumes for the species that require it, obviously don't hit it too hard if you've got your Amazons because they'll get really obese. That kind of creates that like it would in the environment. They're like, oh, look, all this fresh food's around. It must be the time to breed. There's lots of good availability. And you can time this with providing your nesting boxes and all your sort of nesting sites and availability as well to try and create that whole approach to stimulate the birds to actually breed to produce these young that we're aiming for. And the next thing we'll talk about is aviary design. Obviously, there's a couple of cracking aviaries just there. Yeah, aviary design, this is probably where you guys will know most of it already. Aviary design is about creating an environment where the birds feel safe to breed. So often they need privacy and to hide away from predators, because you're obviously not going to spend that time it takes to nest and to do all that when you fear that you're going to get eaten. So I would start looking at what species are you keeping in the aviary. Are you going for a multi-species aviary or a single species aviary? You'd need to think about what the purpose of the aviary is. If the purpose of the aviary is to have a holistic, fairly natural environmental looking thing, then multi-species works really well for you. If your aim is to produce birds and to sort of breed a certain species, then yeah, you want to go for a single species aviary, because often some species will compete significantly for resources, and others, they just won't get on. If you have them at two different sizes or they're just not well matched, then your issues are that they just won't breed because they're scared of the other birds that are in the aviary. And then have a think, is there anything else that can scare the birds? What is the general foot traffic around the aviary like? What are the pets around the aviary like? Are there any wild birds, any wild predators that come and roost? Have we provided enough privacy for them to actually be able to nest without fear of getting eaten? So this is where making a traffic management map can be quite helpful. So this is from a paper on, was about a cockatiel breeding facility. So the top section up there, you've got the sort of kitchen and the incubation area where they prepare all the food and incubate the eggs. And then obviously down here is the actual aviary itself with the nesting boxes. This one was more designed to show the spread of disease, which can also be really helpful, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on. But you can also use that to realize that actually, if we've got a lot of traffic around the nesting boxes, and we get that a lot of the day, then it's not surprising that the birds may not want to use them or keep coming in and out of them and don't spend any time on the nest. Next one is aviary hygiene. It would be a lot easier if we could just do that and you wouldn't actually have to clean anything. But unfortunately, that is not a very practical way of preventing the spread of disease. Fecal contamination is probably one of the main ways that we get disease in aviaries. Obviously from birds within the aviary, so if we're not cleaning them sufficiently or regularly, but also preventing fecal spread from wild birds. So wild birds carry a whole lot of disease issues, and it can be tricky to maintain a closed aviary and a closed population when you've got exposure to wild birds. So often trying to prevent, even by having sort of solid roofing and shielding from water bowls, so they can't poo in water bowls. Most diseases spread will go from fecal oral. So if you can just you don't have to get rid of the wild birds necessarily, but if you can cut out the connection. So if you mean that they basically can't connect the fecal to the oral, so they can't poo in the food bowl, they can't poo in the water bowl, that's the number one way to stop the disease coming into your aviaries. And yeah, just using bird-safe disinfectants. So commonly one that we use in the practice is F10, but there's a whole bunch of different ones out there. I'm sure you guys know of a bunch. All right, so this is when most people come to see me. What happens when it doesn't work? Things that go wrong at the right time and things that go wrong at the wrong time. Usually, most of the birds I see is when things have gone wrong. So you generally get issues with egg production. I've never quite seen any eggs produced like that, but there we go. We need to sort of look at where is the problem happening. Is it a generalized issue or is it just from one pair of birds? So often trying to keep meticulous records, this is where that will really save you and save us a bunch of time too. And a bunch of sort of diagnostics. If we know what we're looking at, it will drastically change the way that we do our investigation in the reproduction. So, yeah, generalized issue. We go back through all the stuff we've just done. A diet review. Have we stuck with the dry season, wet season? Have we veered from the original plan? Are we just sort of, adding more fresh fruit through the dry season because they like it and we like to see them happy, which is totally understandable. But is that sort of reducing that queue on the reproduction? Aviary design and hygiene. Have we got new predators in the area that we were not aware of originally? Have they sort of set up a nest in a different spot so the birds are now not as shielded from the nesting when they're nesting, and they're looking straight down the eyes of some sort of raptor that's staring them off while they're trying to nest? Hygiene. Have we, got a bit slack with our cleaning? Have some of our protective shields broken down, so we're now getting contamination into the water bowls? And back to privacy and just in general. Are they able to be seen when they're breeding, as opposed not necessarily by predators, but just in general? Have we had a problem with the local weather? Have we had a bit of a cold spell? There's not much either of us can do about that, but it may just be an explanation as to why you're not having as much success as you have in the past. And it may not necessarily be anything super pathological. It's not always a dire problem. Sometimes it's just as simple as you've changed the food, and that's messed things about. I had a friend who got me over because his chickens all stopped laying eggs. They were the healthiest chickens I've ever seen. He just bought a cheap bag of feed, and then it had no calcium in it, and that's why they stopped laying eggs. So we added some calcium, and it was easy as that. So it's not always doom and gloom from the vet, but this is when you come for a health exam, and then hopefully we don't find anything too dire. If we've got a single pair of birds, are they a true pair? It may not just be an extra leg is the only thing that she's been hiding from him. Like, have you had them sexed? So there are two ways to sex these days. There's DNA sexing. Benefits of that, you just need a drop of blood on a bit of filter paper. It's pretty simple to do. I think most labs you can just do it from a nail clipping these days. The downside is it's not always validated in every species, especially if you're breeding some rarer species. You might find that you might run into a bit of trouble if you think, oh, that's a male and a female by DNA sexing. It's pretty good, but it's not always 100%, especially if it's not sort of your more commonly known species. The other one is endoscopic sexing. So that's probably, we'll see some endoscopic pictures later. That's probably my favorite thing to do in practice. I don't really care what species I was on the other end of the camera, as long as I'm on the eyepiece end. That basically, it's brilliant. It allows you to see an up-close picture. You can see whether you've got a testes or an ovary. It's almost instant. You can also see if there's any other pathology. So have you got any ovarian cysts? Have you got any testicular cysts? Have you got a big ovarian cancer, uterine disease? Is your abdomen full of fluid? Is there another reason why things are not working out for you? And are the birds old enough? So it's about knowing the species that you're breeding. Particularly young birds may not be old and sexually mature. Another winner where endoscopy comes in. You can see on the ovary, because there's not a test for whether, you just sort of have to know by age. There are some hormonal tests out there, but again, I don't think they're validated for every species. Whereas endoscopy, you can see a mature ovary versus an immature ovary, and same for the testes. So are your birds reproductively active? And if not, then you sort of think, well, okay, are they not young enough? Or is it just that they're just not that into each other? All right, so this is what a mature female ovary, so on the left would be a sort of fairly standard looking parrot. You see how the ovary there looks like a loose bunch of grapes. Your larger follicles there are probably your more mature ones. That tells me that we're fairly mature, because obviously we're reproductively active because we've got lots of little follicles, but we've also got bigger ones, and they're growing up into the really large ones. Those all look fairly clear and normal, so when you get some pathology on them, they look kind of cloudy and look a bit funny, and then they get odd-shaped and different colours. And you think probably that looks a bit gnarly. Why is it all black? That's because it's in a cockatoo. So all cockatoo species, a lot of their gonads are pigmented black. I was in a galah the other day that all the sort of connective tissue was also black. So it made it very tricky to find out what's going on. But that, again, is another mature, you can see the different follicle sizes. And that red stuff is not blood, by the way, that's just the kidney, so don't worry. And also this camera is about 3 millimeters in diameter, so blown up to be massive. So if you see a little spot of blood, it's not actually that big of a problem. And this is compared to an immature female. So, if you put that in your birds and then you see how there just aren't those distinct follicles. They're kind of you can kind of see the lobulatedness of the follicles and the bits, but it's just sort of all the one size. So nothing's really happening there. So if you had a pair of birds and you could look in here and I could say, look, she's not reproductively active, she might be too young. And if you think, why haven't I got anything from her? If she's produced eggs in the past, then there might be, for some other reason, some other health problem going on that's sort of stopping her from producing. All right, mature males. So you've got the big, large testy there, huge blood supply to it. Looks like basically a refried bean, sort of a yellow bean-like structure. Sits in the same place at the end of the kidney. And it's just much bigger. We'll show you some immature males in a minute. But yeah, so if you put that in and he's like that, then there's just got to be another reason why. Immature males. Those are the only pictures I had. Yeah, so that's the human version. The bird version looks like this. You can see, it's a bit hard to tell in this picture, but there's not nearly as many blood vessels on that testy, and it's actually significantly smaller than that pole of the kidney. So that big round thing there is the cranial pole of the kidney, so the front bit. Normally, your mature testy, as you could see, is almost sort of halfway up the kidney. Here, it's barely even making a dent. So, again, we need to make sure that the birds that we have are actually able to produce. And do you have a compatible pair? So, this one is almost next to impossible to actually diagnose. You just need to sort of trial and error, because obviously there's not a test for is she into you, because that would save a lot of people some awkward teenage years if they could actually work that out. It's the same for birds. They don't, not every bird gets on with every hen gets on with every cock. So you've just got to, that one's more about ruling out other problems. So it may be that they're just not compatible. So we're getting eggs, but they're infertile. Okay, so we need to work out whether they're actually infertile or we're getting early embryonic death. So generally one way you can do that is to candle them. And you can also do an egg autopsy. So it's to do with the way the yolk looks. If there's a little sort of germinal disc still in the yolk, then that tells us that we did have some germinal development at the start. I couldn't find a kind of clear enough picture that when you blew it up on the slide it actually looked, but it can tell you that you had some development and then something went wrong in incubation. So it may be not that it's nothing to do with the birds, it's how we're incubating them that's causing these problems. There are plenty of problems that can come from the birds that would cause embryonic death, but it's sort of a different line. Again, getting infertile eggs, we want to be looking into the health check of the birds. So generally, you'll see things on the outside of the egg. So we're going to cover basically the three main issues. Any bird illness, any systemic illness will cause problems with reproduction. So reproduction is not, it's a priority in terms of maintaining your genetic line, but it's also not a priority in terms of living, because you need to dedicate a decent amount of energy to it, and you need to have that energy spare. So I could talk for hours and hours and hours and hours about different diseases, but I'm going to narrow it down just to these three, because these are probably the most common that would affect fertility in an aviary setting. So ophiritis, which is a fancy word for ovary inflammation, salpingitis and metritis, uterine inflammation, and retained eggs. Vets love to make up fancy words because it makes us feel important. So ophiritis, you can see here compared to the other one that there's a lot more of this sort of connective tissue, so this clear, like it looks kind of like clear cellophane tissue all over the ovaries. And these brown things here are large ovarian cysts. So you'll see this was all in the same bird. This was in a small cockatiel. That was sort of at the cranial pole, so the head end of the ovary right over there, and it wraps all the way around, and this is it coming out down past the uterus. So this was a bird found sitting on the bottom of the cage. So often the clinical signs is you've got a generically unwell bird, and they're just sort of sitting unwell. Sometimes if you get a mild cause of this, you just get a reduction in fertility, or a reduction in egg production as well. Generally, the causes of this, it can be bacterial, fungal, viral. It can spread via the blood. So birds have a normal level of bacteria in their blood, which is really cool, but it's not so great when they have any inflammation or damage in an organ, because that bacteria can then set up causing an infection. The other issue you can get if you have like an air sacculitis or a peritonitis, these are all kind of fairly well connected. So when we put the camera in, we basically go in through the caudal thoracic air sac. So you've probably seen it if you've had sexing done endoscopically. Basically drag the leg forward, you pop a hole in the side of the body, pop it in through the air sac, and then you go through the other side of the air sac into the abdomen, and that's where you get all these pictures from. But if you have an infection in there, it can eat its way through the air sac and then spread in and connect up to the reproductive tract. The other thing is general peritonitis. So if you get an egg yolk peritonitis from, say, a uterine problem, so the yolk goes down and pops back up and then gets into the abdomen tries to destroy it, you get a whole bunch of scrambled egg in there, and that infection and aggravation irritates the ovary. And those ones will generally produce as unwell. Here, what you can do, another joy and marvel of endoscopy, is you grab a biopsy of it. So I've got a little pair of grabbers that come down, take a little punch biopsy. I can see if there's any cancer in there. I can see if it's just inflammatory, and I can also send a sample off for culture. So we can grow the bacteria up and actually test them against a series of antibiotics and make sure the antibiotics we give you are the ones that will actually work. Not just give you a 10-day course and then go, I'm still unwell, let's try another one, because we might just be guessing. Salpingitis and metritis. This is basically an infection of the uterus. So again, predisposing factors for this are overly heavy birds, or birds that are on malnutrition, and older birds. So particularly old birds will get this as well. You'll often see, some of the first signs you'll see are abnormal issues with the egg. You'll either see red streaking on the egg, or sort of overly heavy deposition of the shell. And you might also get just slower, like they take longer to lay the egg than we would expect. This is a picture from Bob Donnelly's textbook. It's just sort of a classic. You can see all the inflammation and the gunk sort of building up in there. That's your ovary on the far right corner. All the rest of that should be fairly clear, almost see-through, but it's kind of yellow and aggravated, which is all of your sort of reproductive tract and all the inflammation from a peritonitis. Diagnosis-wise, again, you've got ultrasound is one, depending on the size of your patient. Obviously, if you're working in some of the smaller species, ultrasound, the issue you have is all those air sacs, so ultrasound doesn't go through air. If you have too big a footplate on your little ultrasound probe, you just get a lot of air contamination, and it's not going to work. But yeah, you can often see, you look checking for the presence of free fluid in the abdomen, any issues in the reproductive tract, any sort of basically fluid building up in the uterus. The other one is obviously endoscopy, so x-rays as well. X-rays can be a bit harder to determine because those don't differentiate sort of between different types of soft tissue. But yeah, this one, again, similar treatment. It depends on the severity of it, but if the reproductive tract is really clogged full of foreign material, you kind of have to remove it because the bird's not going to get rid of it on its own. If it's just inflammation and fluid, you can trial antibiotics and anti-inflammatories to try and reduce that issue. But yeah, it depends on the severity as to the treatment. And the last one we'll talk about is retained eggs. So retained eggs, you might see a big swollen coelom, so you can often feel an egg. This one was a cockatiel that presented last week that had, just for a general health check, we felt an egg in there. Not unusual for a bird to have an egg inside it. That's what they do. But actually, it took a little while for the owners to get things organised to get the x-rays done, and the egg was still there after a week. So, but clinically, perfectly well. Wouldn't even notice. It only came in for a general health exam. So it's not always necessarily obvious. Classic clinical signs will be, again, flat on the bottom of the cage, unproductive straining, just generally flat. Diagnosis is most commonly done by x-ray. X-rays are super helpful because this one, we only had one simple egg and it was fairly well formed. You can often get what I call a multi-car pileup. So you've got one egg that's stuck in there and then everyone comes ramming down the back of it and you get 3 or 4. You're never going to get that out with medication alone. That is going to need surgery. So this one here, you can see the egg just looks a bit more abnormal. That is, I'm pretty sure that was a little budgie. It just looks like he's already started to prolapse as well. That's just one egg and you can see how dense it is compared to the bones. That's an egg that's been there for quite some time. If it's a simple one, like the previous one, we can try fluids, calcium, and a warm place to lay an egg. And more often than not, that will produce the egg. And then we can investigate why it happened. So this often happens secondary to some other uterine disease, or if we've been having a really aggressive laying season. So if we just run out of nutrients and run out of energy. If that doesn't work, you can put them under an anesthetic, push the egg up to the cloaca and do what's called a transcloacal ovocentesis. See, we love making up fancy words, which is basically you push the egg up, you pop a hole in it, you suck all the yolk out, you collapse the egg down. Often if it's not stuck to the reproductive tract, you can just pull the fragments out that way. The other option you have is to give us some prostaglandin, which will help contract the uterus and then push everything out the other end. This one here, ones like this, or if you've got a multi-carb pile-up, where you're particularly worried about the egg, if it's a weird and particularly valuable bird, then you can go in for a C-section, which is essentially, as it sounds, put the bird under an anesthetic, have an abdominal surgery, remove the egg, close the cloaca, and then put us all back together. So that looks just like that, except for some reason they're upside down. So basically, we use that big ring retractor to open up the tiny little coelom. You pull the egg out. You can try and keep it in one piece, and then you basically sew everything back together. Obviously, this has more risk because you're having major surgery to the hen, and there's also the possibility of wound breakdown. So if it gets stuck in your cloaca, then the issue you have is everything else passes through there. So you get fecal contamination of the wound, which can then break down and cause a peritonitis. So it's only, we try to save that one only for really serious situations. But if we do a lot of the other things right and get the nutrition sorted and we get them sort of plenty of opportunities to lay, we don't often end up in that situation. Thank you very much for your time. So basically just remember differing nutrition between the seasons, and just trying to keep clear records would be my one takeaway from this, so that when we do have to work out what's going wrong, we have a really good idea of where to start. We're not sort of wasting your money, basically. We can use the funds that you have to target it fairly accurately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we've got some questions. I've got one with your egg binding. Do you see as much of this in birds that are on pelleted diets nowadays, with the more people in the uptake of pellets? Or?
No, it depends on the species, but you're right, commonly seen on seed only because they're usually low in calcium, and there's other birds that are a bit overweight, which makes them more likely to retain the egg. The only ones that I think we still see it on would be your cockatiels, because those things are, especially your single cockatiels that are bonded to an individual, are just chronic egg producers. And people then take the egg out, and then they produce another one, take the egg out, and produce another one. And then they basically just run out of calcium. But often those ones are the ones that will respond medically, because it's not because there's a big cancer or a big ovarian cyst, because like cysts will block up, you obviously make it harder for you to pass an egg. They're more just, you load them full of the drugs, you keep them warm and rehydrate them, and then give the uterus something to contract with, because the uterus needs calcium to contract. If it doesn't have the calcium, nothing's happening. I can give it all the prostaglandin in the world, but it's got nothing to actually push it out with. So not as much on the pelleted diets, but depends on the species. I think cockatiels, no matter what you feed them, if they are one of those hormonally driven ones, they're just going to push out tons of eggs.
And generally, if it's comes out either
generally,
I say naturally with a bit of help medication or whatever, are they 9 times out of 10 still viable breeders, or is it?
It depends on the primary issue. So often we'll then look at doing some blood work and trying to ultrasound them to see if there's like a botrytis or something going on. They can still be viable. What I generally recommend is having either short supralorin implant or a luprin implant. It does stop them, so there's hormones to basically stop the hormonal reproduction, to stop them producing eggs, to give them a season of rest. Because often when they're so depleted, you just can't get the supplies back up to them for them to do to reproduce in that season. But going forward, no, there's no reason why they can't. We just need to sort of manage their environment a little better and sort of fiddle with their diet as well.
Good. There's obviously questions. I'll bring the microphone to you, Jude.
No such thing.
Yeah. I've got a big community aviary now, right? And all my birds used to be on pellets. But this has got all little birds in it now, and I've sort of been forced into putting seed. So how am I going to make those other birds? So there's diamond doves, and there's look, little cute things, those Burke's parrots and things, and they only eat seed. So how do I get extra calcium into them?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one. There are some calcium-heavy veg, so your kale and your broccolis and your spinaches are higher in calcium. I would say pushing the veggie component would be a good start. Yeah, pellets, they're really good for them, but they're just hard to get it into them. There are supplements you can add to water and things like that, but often, as you're aware, when you start medicating the water, they're not stupid. They know they're being medicated and they don't want to drink it.
And there are also lots and lots of princess parrots in there too.
Yeah, right.
So now that they're just going, oh wow, now I've got seed, they're hardly even eating their pellets.
Yeah. It can be tricky,
devils,
and I guess that's the hassle of a mixed species community aviary, is that in terms of maintaining the nutrition to it, that presents a challenge for you, because you've got multiple species that have different requirements in terms of pellets and seeds and things, and that can be really tough.
Do you feed sprouted seed, Jude? Yeah, and then what you can do with that is you can use that as a medium to give them other stuff like D-Nutrical, the Vetafarm super calcium and vitamins. Even the liquid calcium, you can put it on your sprouted seed. But you got to understand, those little birds and doves can swallow quite large things. I've seen a wonga pigeon swallow an egg. I didn't think it could get it down, but they can. So they've got more patience than you. So if you persevere with them, they will go to pellets. There's no two buts about it. But you've got to have the patience to put up with it and think that you're doing the right thing, and don't let them get to a stage where they're going to get sick. But they'll be eating them and you don't even know about it. You know, if you've got other birds in there eating pellets, I don't find anything hard to convert. It's having the patience to do it and be willing to mix seed with it too, until you get to a stage where you think they're going to just go straight onto the pellets. See, you're the one that's got the problem, it's not the birds. And I don't say that offensively, I just say that's how we see it. And then sprouted seed's the way to go. If you feed sprouted or soaked seed, you can use that as a medium for anything. And the parrot shop has got everything you can get to mix with it. All right? Okay, thank you.
Other thing to keep in mind is not every species is like good to be loaded full of pellets. So a lot of your arid species, pellets can be quite high in protein. I think originally they were derived from chicken pellets and things like that. So it can overwork the kidneys if it's, because I've seen clients who most indoor sort of single cockatiel things, they go, oh, I give him pellets. That's all he has all day. And it's kind of, then they go, oh, he's really off. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen his kidneys are completely knackered. Oh, he's only 3. It's kind of like, well, you've just blasted them with protein nonstop. So like I think sprouted seed, brilliant idea. But not necessarily, like pellets are not necessarily for every single bird. But yes, they're like 5-year-olds. They're less patient than you. Other way around.
Maybe this is a very basic question. Do lorikeets have a special time of the year when they breed?
It's a wonderful question. I don't actually know the answer to that. I think they... Right, there you go.
Yeah, it depends on the season, where they come from, all that sort of stuff. But most of them August. Yeah, most of them are August on. See, in Australia, we don't take it into consideration where the birds come from. A lot of your northern birds go early, and your southern birds tend to go later because it's cooler. You speak to most of the breeders down south who put their boxes in, they won't put their boxes in till September, where in Queensland we put ours in, if I'm going to put boxes in, on Horsey's birthday, 1st of August. And ringnecks, you want them in a little bit earlier than that because they always, by August, about exhibition time, they're normally on eggs. So there's plenty of books and stuff that'll tell you, but what species you're talking about? Rainbows? They go all year round. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned. Offer them a box and make sure their diet's right, and if they want to breed, they'll breed.
This is another probably silly question. I had a pair of eclectus, and they had laid eggs, and then a few days later they'd disappear. And we couldn't work out what we worked out. One of them ate them, or both ate them, but they laid eggs, or she laid eggs all the time, but then they never hatched, or
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There's a, as we've sort of been through, there's a bunch of reasons why that could happen. Have a chat to me later and we can go through some of the more specifics about the individuals. Why they're sort of laying them and they're not hatching. Yeah, it can be basically, is some underlying health issue, is there, and doesn't even need to be an obvious health problem. Sometimes they're just not great parents and they lay them and then they destroy them. Not cannibals, sorry, yeah.
We're new to bird breeding, so hopefully this isn't a silly question, but is it true that hen-tamed birds are less likely to breed?
No, I wouldn't think so. Like I've seen a ton of hand-tamed birds produce a ton of eggs in terms of when they think they're bonded with their owner. So I think it would be about getting a bird that they will bond with, and then setting up the conditions right for breeding. But I wouldn't, there'd be no, I think maybe if they think they're a person and they've been inappropriate, have an inappropriate bond in that sense, then it could be trickier. But anatomically and like physiologically, there's no reason why that should be the case. Yeah.
Oh, yep. One more question while you're on about the lorikeets. Do you see the egg binding in aviary lorikeets with them being on predominantly, obviously, lorry mixes, commercial lorry mixes, etc.?
I've not personally. I don't know what other vets are seeing, but I've not personally had that. It's not in the lorries.
In egg binding, when they're passing the egg, does that affect their nerves for their legs? Because paralyses the legs and gives them about 3 weeks before they can walk properly again.
Yeah, so not to bore you with the neuroanatomy because it bores everyone, but there's a thing called an obturator nerve which basically passes down the endoscidic nerve, which passes down past the kidney. I think actually if I zip back, what have we got on there? Not these fellas. This thing here, so that's your sciatic nerve. So if you get big eggs putting pressure on that, it causes leg issues. And your obturator nerve basically holds your legs up under your body. So that's if you get an overly large egg coming out of an overly small pelvis, then that puts pressure on there, especially if it's slow or it gets stuck. So it's that constant pressure which can damage the nerve. And sometimes, it will come back and it takes a long time. Other times, if it's been there long enough, it unfortunately doesn't come back. And so that can be a consequence of that. But you'll see there, like that egg, that's a fairly standard size egg. But this bird, weirdly, because I look at that and I think, it was actually quite mobile, which you can't tell from the X-ray, obviously, because it's a static image. But yeah, if you'd had that sort of in getting a lot of calcium deposition and then it got stuck in the uterus as well, and then as they're trying to push this monstrous egg out, they can damage the nerves, especially if it takes them a while. But you might find also if they have ataxia issues, it could be a calcium problem. So if they're having issues pushing that massive egg out, then they're probably depleted their stools as well. And then all muscle function needs calcium. So it could be related to that as well.
If you're doing an endoscopy purely for sexing purposes, how often would you find something unexpected?
Not very often, to be fair. It's more the ones where we find the problems are when they've either stopped producing or it's the generically unwell bird that you x-ray and it's got a big swelling up in the area of its kidney, or you get, like our friend said about the legs, you get a bird that kind of brings in that one-sided leg problem. Just generally, not routinely. They're fairly. I guess it's the advantage of endoscopy is that if you do, but I don't have any specific figures off the top of my head, but not massively.
All right, thank you very much. We'll pause or stop now, and we'll go and have a barbecue. The guys should have that ready, so we can certainly. Sorry. Yes. So we'll draw the raffle ticket outside, so we can get outside, and while people are having a barbecue. So Katie's got some prizes raffle prizes up the front. So thank you very much, Tom, for presenting today. Come back. Oh, it's not cold, Jude. Tom. Great. Thank you very much for that. So look, Tom, you'll stay around for a barbecue? Yep. So look, certainly if you've got another question, he'll be around for a while. So if everyone wants to grab, if you wouldn't mind, if you can grab your chair on the way out, just plonk them outside and we'll put them back on the thing. So thank you very much, and we'll draw the raffle prize very soon. So thank you.